Ozone therapy works for a lot of different things: cancer, Lyme, autoimmune, infectious disease, and mold toxicity.
Why is ozone so effective for mold toxicity specifically?
Ozone therapy, as we know, it's an antiseptic. It's killing pathogen, killing infection. It has some of that direct effect, but it's also stimulating your immune system to be able to function better.
Welcome to Grounded Wellness. I'm your host, Bethany McDaniel, founder of Primally Pure, mom of three, and biohacking enthusiast. We created this podcast to bring you practical advice to live a more vibrant and intentional life rooted in long-lasting health. We record right here on our regenerative farm, grounded with our feet in the soil, exploring bold truths, overlooked wisdom, and holistic tools that support true well-being. These conversations will challenge everything you know about health and wellness. Ozone therapy has long been misunderstood, often dismissed or even labeled as dangerous. Yet it's used as a healing tool in many other countries and has even been called the cheapest drug on earth. On this episode of Grounded Wellness, I'm joined by Micah Lowe, the founder of Simply O3 and a pioneer in the world of ozone education. Micah has been a leading voice in the biohacking and holistic health space, advocating for ozone as an affordable at-home therapy for wide-reaching health benefits. In this conversation, you'll learn how ozone works, the many ways to use it safely, and why it's being suppressed by Western medicine despite its proven success. Let's dig in. Micah, I cannot wait to chat all things ozone with you today. Can you first explain to our audience what ozone is?
Yeah, ozone is a gas. It is O3, whereas oxygen is O2, so it's very similar to oxygen. But in its gas form, it is an oxidant. And a lot of people think, well, why would I use an oxidant? Isn't oxidative stress bad? Isn't that's just going to create more stress in my body, right? It's kind of counterintuitive in that sense, because when you look at all the literature, and there's over 2,000 medical studies, not all of them about oxidative stress, but a good portion have that built in. What you see is that it actually counteracts oxidative stress, and it's kind of counterintuitive. So what happens when you apply it into the body, essentially it does stimulate a mild acute oxidative stress, so a small amount of stress to your
Which,
body.
by the way, exercise does the same thing.
Exercise, sauna, lots of things do. So it causes that small amount of stress, and then your body recognizes that and goes, oh, we need antioxidants. So that's part of where you get that protective effect in the case of like chemotherapy patients or something like that. Improves quality of life for them because they are protecting the cells as you need to be doing. So yeah, counterintuitive. You're using an oxidant to actually combat chronic oxidative stress.
What's the history of ozone and how was it first discovered?
Yeah, it actually has a pretty long history. I went into this a while back because there's nowhere that you can just look up like what's the history of ozone. So I had to, it was kind of a fun exercise because I had to go through like all the source material and that kind of stuff. So I found I can't remember the exact year. I'm a little bit rusty on it now, but I think it was in the 1870s or 60s. There was a professor out of Germany that was using it as an antiseptic. And
Germany's always so far ahead with like health stuff and anything like natural and great.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to their time and what they were doing, but this professor apparently was using it. He found that it was useful for like wound care and that kind of stuff. But then until the 1890s, I couldn't really find much more information on it. That was like some publication that was out there that guy had. And then there was this guy in the UK who also manufactured hydrogen peroxide, and he actually used ozone oil. It was called glycosone. And so he would recommend the use of hydrogen peroxide with this ozonated oil. And he was a pretty successful businessman in England. And then when it started to get more recognition, because I think it's a little bit hard to tell the history of it because like there's just so many missing pieces and you see like something in Germany and then you're like, oh, there's something in Turkey too. I have no idea how it got there.
Yeah.
But anyway, in the World War I, Dr. Stoker kind of popularized it because he was using it for soldiers that were wounded. So, they would get like a gunshot or some sort of wound. A lot of them would actually die from the infection. So that was a huge deal. And this is prior to antibiotics. So a lot of folks were passing away just from the infection. So he started using ozone for wound care and clearing up infections and that kind of thing. And then that is what like started to help it go around the world a little bit more. And then essentially speeding that up to the 1860s, there was Dr. Biohacking, who's considered the father of ozone therapy. He was a scientist. He dedicated his career to studying ozone therapy because he felt like it was such a novel thing that everybody needed to know about. And so he really laid the scientific groundwork for everything that exists with it today around the world.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but your dad was involved in ozone in Africa in some capacity. Is that right?
So yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. It's kind of a long story, so I'll do the abridged version. But essentially, my brother was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer when I was, I think, 14, 15, somewhere in there. He had a oligodendroglioblastoma, which is a pretty rare brain cancer, but kind of speeding up a little bit. So he was going through, the medical care system and all that kind of stuff, and had a number of open brain surgeries, et cetera. But he was navigating it relatively well. Like, he was expected to pass away pretty quickly after that diagnosis, but he didn't. And so anyway, there was actually this mission work that my church was doing in Africa where they were supporting a hospital being built there in Togo, West Africa. I actually got to go. There was one of the local missionaries to that area was using something called ultraviolet blood irradiation. And then he was a part of our church as well when he came back on furlough. He was talking with my dad like, yeah, we use this thing called UBI. It's great for infections, rabies, like all this kind of stuff that we just don't have access to conventional medical care that we can give these people. So we use this. And so he started to look into that a little bit. And turns out that had a really interesting past too with, oh man, I'm blanking on the guy, but it was in the 1920s and it had a history with the AMA was trying to buy the rights to this thing at that time and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, it has a long history as well. Really good for infections and things of that nature. And UBI is when you pull out a little bit of blood, you expose it to UV light, and then reintroduce it into the body.
And people are doing that now in combination with ozone.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. There's hundreds of thousands of therapies done every year, just in the States, and then worldwide even more. So it's not a huge therapy. Like the scale of it doesn't compare to some of the other ones that are out there, but there's a lot of it that's happening. But yeah, that gave him, he got started on a business with that. And how my brother ties into this is I was working with my dad on the ultraviolet blood irradiation, bringing that into clinics, trying to help clinics get started with it, and basically bringing all this stuff from Europe where it's being used and trying to create something similar in the United States. And then as I was talking to these doctors, all these doctors were telling me about ozone therapy.
In Africa, these doctors were telling you about it.
So that missionary that was in Africa, he was using it in Africa, but these doctors were actually in the United States.
Okay.
So he was the one that told my dad about UBI. And then I was working with my dad on UBI. And then through the doctors that I was talking with, the clinics that were starting to use it, I learned about ozone therapy. And so then that was we started applying that to Matt, and it was something that was really helpful for him, my brother that had brain cancer. So.
And how did you administer that? How did your brother, in what capacity did he use ozone therapy?
As an IV primarily. Okay. So you use it in intravenous form, which is essentially, again, you take out some blood. You mix in ozone gas. You can also have the UBI. So as the blood goes back into the body, it's exposed to the lights and has the ozone put in it already.
As far as the use of ozone in Africa, I've heard that it has been used to treat things like HIV and Ebola. Is that accurate?
There's Dr. Rowan, that he's a little bit more of a cowboy physician. He treated 6 people who reported that they had Ebola, but there was no lab work or anything to confirm that they did or didn't. So I would say it wasn't a super credible form in the sense, but yeah, nonetheless, he felt really convicted about it, and it's like, this is something I need to share because Ebola has a 90% death rate, approximately. Really, really dangerous infection. And so based on his consensus of those people, none of them died, and so he attributed it to ozone.
So you had witnessed the benefits of ozone in your brother's life. What changes did you see in him, and what made you want to go deeper into the world of ozone?
Yeah, so going more specifically into my brother's story and how I got into this world of ozone therapy and a lot of other stuff too. I have a lot of other interests. Like last 2 years, I've been working on a clinical metabolomics test, which is essentially like quantifying the metabolism, how your body is functioning according to that type of stuff. And so there's been this huge world that's opened up to me. And basically what had happened is another individual from church had recommended my brother do hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And so we started doing that with him every day. At this point, he had lost a lot of his critical thinking processes. Like he was still navigating the world okay, but just a very different person than he was previously, even personality wise. And so we started doing the hyperbaric oxygen treatments with him, and that massively benefited him. He was critical thinking, personality came back, sleeping better, less fatigue, just like all quality of life metrics really improved.
How often was he doing it?
Every day for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's doing a lot of sessions.
I love HBOT.
Yeah.
I have one at home.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. A really, really good treatment. But yeah, so the physicians at Johns Hopkins, because that was a hospital he was going to, is kind of the poster child for cancer care. And I think they did a really good job. I do think that the scope in which physicians can act is a little bit limited just based on how our structure is set up. But anyway.
Yeah, chemo, surgery, radiation.
Yeah, cut, burn, and poison.
It's basically their toolkit.
Yep. So,
but they did prescribe him hyperbaric oxygen.
No, that was the thing. So we went and told them like, hey, he's doing HBOT. It's massively helped him. What do you think about, like, just trying to have some dialogue, think about outside the box a little bit. And they're just like, oh, that's really cute. And like, you think that did it? That was kind of not exactly what they said, but that was kind of the sentiment that we were provided. Like, hey, we'll do the work. You just like, if that makes you feel better about yourself, go for it.
So they saw the changes in him, but they still weren't willing to acknowledge that it was the hyperbaric.
Well, yeah, just like a lot of physicians, and I shouldn't say it's not all physicians, but some physicians can be very dismissive. And I think that is what creates a lot of the distrust with people, is when you feel like you're not listened to, that it's dismissed. Because I think there's just this attitude of we know best. And I think, some of that is born from a place of like actually wanting to protect medicine and actually like get people results. I think some of it is also born of like it's easier and it's a little bit ego. Like I just don't have to explain this. I don't have to figure this out. I don't have to engage my thought processes because I can just kind of say, well, this person is stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. I know what medicine is, right? And so I think that's the attitude that I was kind of seeing there. But at the time I wanted to become a physician. And so I started going to school. I was going to become a nurse and then hopefully become a physician because I had to kind of pay my own way there and I didn't want any debt and that kind of stuff. So, 18-year-old idea of how it would work out. But anyway, that kind of opened up my world a little bit of like, oh, so there's something that's like really helpful for Matt that the doctors are saying like shouldn't be helpful. So what are the other things that could be helpful for him that I'm just not going to find through them? So ozone was another example, talking to these other physicians, right? They suggested trying it with him, and it was another thing that was just helpful to him. So that was really kind of the world opening experience of going through that. And then what really piqued my curiosity about it even more so was just like these doctors would call in and say like, I'm using it with Lyme. I'm using it with like, I remember this one doctor from Iran was talking about his use of it with gangrene. And he's like, yeah, people aren't getting amputated when I give them this. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. But then you're kind of thinking like, how does it work with all these different things? So just kind of an interesting subject to dig into.
I first heard about ozone therapy. I'm pretty sure it was from you on another podcast years ago. And I just thought, like, why have I not heard of this before? This is so interesting. And I always kind of knew like at some point I wanted to invest in a generator. And it wasn't until a few years ago we were exposed to pretty high levels of toxic mold. And I was like, okay, it's time. So I bought the generator and there's so many different things you can do with it. It's kind of crazy. Can you walk our audience through all of the different ways to utilize and administer ozone?
Yeah, there's a lot. Essentially, the only thing you can't do with it is breathe it. So you can't put it into the lungs. And everybody knows this, by the way, but this is like where ozone therapy gets so much discredit because people like know about its effect on the lungs, which is not good. So you can't breathe it in. Your lungs don't have what's called an antioxidant defense system because you need to breathe in oxygen. You need to metabolize that and use it to create energy. So you don't want antioxidant defenses there. But it can be applied pretty much everywhere else in the body because that antioxidant defense system exists. Like your blood has it because it needs to be able to mitigate oxidative stress and do all these other things. So like you need those antioxidants to support all the processes of your body.
And even if you breathe a little bit, like it's not gonna like not poisonous gas. It's just you don't want to breathe a lot of it or else that can
So
be
it'll
harmful,
irritate the lungs if you breathe a lot. If you were to sit in a closet huffing it at high doses for a really long time, you could potentially like cause some burn, but that's a situation nobody's in. But you could cause some burning of the lungs essentially because it's oxidizing it, be coughing and that kind of stuff, and that wouldn't be good. But if you, even OSHA has a standard where it's like, hey, below this limit is totally fine. 8 hours a day, you can be in that type of thing. And you can smell it before it gets to that limit. So a lot of people get kind of neurotic about it because they're like, oh, well, I can smell it. Well, that doesn't always mean that it's usually never. I mean, I've been around it for so long. I'm a little bit more cavalier with it than other people might be, but that doesn't mean that it's gonna hurt your lungs just if you can smell it.
It's
you can
really
smell
easy
it
to detect and smell.
It's very easy to detect. It's one of the most detectable molecules by smell. So you can smell it at like 5 parts per million or something, which is really, really, really low. But yeah, you can apply it into the body all sorts of other ways. So there's systemic use, which is like we're going to try to benefit the whole body and we're going to try to upgrade the system. And then there's localized use, which would be more like that doctor from Iran that was treating gangrene. Like that's an infection that's going to be on a limb or something like that. So you can put a bag over it, expose it to the ozone gas, and that would be like a localized treatment. So you have this spectrum of where treatments can sit, either systemic or local. There's 3 ways to systemically get it into the body. That would be IV ozone therapy. And then there's 2 that aren't very glamorous, but are really convenient, and that's vaginal and rectal. The reason people do those is because they're kind of like, you get a lot of the similar benefits as you would IV ozone therapy, but you can do it in a couple minutes. So not very fun to talk about, but it does work pretty well.
It does work well. And that's one of the ways that I used ozone when we first got our generator. And it's kind of like, we're not living at our house right now. It's being remodeled. So I haven't had access to it in like several months now. And I miss it so much because those rectal ozone insufflations with the gas are so powerful. And doing it in the ear canal, is the ear canal systemic or no?
So it does kind of exist on a spectrum. So systemic being like very directed towards the system, and then localized being very directed towards an area. So like ear insufflation, for example, or like ozone sauna would be kind of somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
This is more my personal thought on it based on like all the people I talk to, clinical aspects of it, a little bit of knowledge about its mechanisms, how it works in the body. So I've just kind of tied those things together to build my perspective, but that's not necessarily reflected in literature yet.
Yeah.
So
no, I just felt such a difference with my brain fog and energy levels with both doing it in the ear canal and the rectal insufflations. Like it felt like it just turned my brain on and made me so clear-headed, like felt so good from both of those applications. I think I overdid it in the ear though.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
It got to the point where like and my husband and I, we were both doing it. I think we went off protocol for these because there's, when you buy a Simply O3 generator, it comes with like protocols that you can utilize for different ozone applications. And sometimes I get this mentality of like more is better. Like if something is good, like more is just going to be even better. Yeah. So I was probably doing it too frequently. But I started to get like crusties in the ear, and I just was like, oh, this is good. Like junk is like coming out and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know if that's what it was. I think it was just like
probably just stressing out. I mean, it's a stress response therapy.
Yeah.
So what that means is like, it is supposed to cause your body a little bit of stress, but then your body responds to that stress and has all the benefits from that response. But that also means you can,
classify it? Okay.
Yeah. So that means you can overdo it, just like exercise.
Yeah.
So if you exercise an hour or 2 a day, that's great. It is a stress on the body. So when you like work out, you lift weights, that's actually ripping the muscle, building up lactic acid, these things that would be considered stressors. But then how does your body respond? It gets stronger, it gets more cardiovascular fitness, does all these things that are beneficial. So ozone therapy is similar in like you want it to be the proper dose and not to do, and it's not like this really tight window. It's not like you have to have utmost precision, but you do want to, I mean, the protocols were designed for a reason. I remember this one guy, he's like, I'm a huge believer in ozone therapy. So I asked about his experience, and he's an interesting guy. He just goes for it, does whatever he was telling me about. He's a little bit of a rough around the edges type person. So he's like, hey, I have this pill. If you take it, like, it's like the limitless pill. And I was like, what is it? And he's like, oh, don't ask. Just take it and you'll figure everything out. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
Doesn't sound
But
like
anyway,
a good idea.
yeah. So that's the type of personality
Yeah.
he had. But he's like, yeah, I just did the ear insufflation for 35 minutes my first time. And I felt like I had been poisoned and I was really sick. But then like the next 7 days, I felt like amazing. And don't recommend doing that at all, because I don't know if that's, it's supposed to be like 2 to 4 typically.
I think I was doing it. The max I ever did maybe was 5 minutes, but usually more in that like 2-3 minute range. I was just doing it too frequently.
Yeah.
But that's wild that he did it for that long.
He did. And then he ended up having a really positive response on the other side of that. But
so did he get like a Herx reaction in the beginning and that's why he felt terrible?
I don't think he thought about it too much. I think he was just like, oh, I just feel sick. And whatever it was, it worked. But anyway, the protocols are made for a reason, and they're born out of a number of. I didn't mention there's a lot of literature on it too. It's not like this unstudied thing. There's over 2,000 medical studies. I have yet to find somebody who's like a huge like I hate ozone therapy that has really walked through all the literature. Usually it comes from misnomers about it, just like they hear about it from somewhere. They understand that you can't breathe it into the lungs, but really don't think through that. But anyway, the protocols are born out of mostly the literature. So those really dictate like how it's supposed to be done. And they're, written that way for a reason. And I didn't come up with them, by the way. These are protocols that exist.
But they're super helpful, like just knowing how to utilize ozone for different conditions and like different administrations, because it is kind of confusing. The whole thing is confused. It can be confusing, but you guys make it, I think, as simple as it can possibly be if you have like an at-home ozone generator and you're trying to figure it out. So you can use ozone gas to ozonate your blood, but that is not something to do at home.
Nope.
You would want to go to a doctor for that. You can use the Simply O3 ozone generator at home to use the gas for different things, the insufflations, the ears. You can make ozonated water. Do you want to talk about ozonated water a little bit?
Yeah. So essentially, you can infuse ozone into different things. One of them is water. And when you do that, it will stay in the water for up to a couple hours, but it quickly dismantles and turns back into oxygen. So one project I'm working on right now actually is like a hot tub that just no chemicals ever is the tagline to it, which just uses like a sanitary system that also utilizes ozone. But anyway, there's a therapeutic side where you can infuse ozone gas into water and you can drink it or do a lavage, which is like a wash onto wounds or skin. And that does a couple of things when you put it onto the skin. It clears infection and then speeds healing response time. When you drink it, that really doesn't have a lot of study on it, but a couple of the studies are on like stomach infections, stomach parasites, and that type of thing. Ulcers can be really helpful for. But basically what it's doing is it's cutting infection and speeding healing response time when you use it as a water. And then anecdotally, a lot of people will like drink it and say like, oh, it really helps with this, that, and the other. There's just not like a scientific literature backing to that at this point, because there's a lot of studies on it, but it's pretty complicated to study. So
I think the ozonated water is great. I would make that in the mornings a lot for myself and my kids. That's why I love that use, because it's an easy way to get ozone into children's bodies.
Yeah.
Because the gas, I actually did the ear canal on my kids a little bit with the gas, but I feel like the ozonated water is great.
Yeah, you can do the ozonated water, and then there's ozonated oils that are very similar, but they're stabilized. So the reason we can't ship ozonated water to you, like I said, is it reverts back to oxygen. But when you put it into an oil, it'll stabilize for up to 3 years.
Three
So they,
years?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So it
Do you have to
stabilizes
keep it
at
in
the
the fridge?
peroxide. No, we have it at room temperature. 3 years is what we've tested for. But yeah, they can take the pills too, if they're old enough to swallow something, and that's
Okay.
a little bit easier than having to get an ozone generator and do all that. So.
Yeah. And what benefit does that have on the gut if you swallow ozonated? I'm assuming is it
Yeah,
ozonated like olive oil capsules or some kind of
yeah,
ozonated oil?
exactly. As far as benefits, like it's okay. So the difficult thing here is there is like a scientific literature standpoint that is limited, and then there's essentially clinical evidence, which is like doctors saying like clinical anecdotal evidence, doctors saying like this works for this, and then there's people that say this. But I've talked to thousands of people, so like my consensus on it across all those things from a literature standpoint. It's good for the stomach infections, possibly small intestine, so like SIBO.
Hmm.
But just there's not a lot of literature there, but there is some good ones on infections. And then basically how doctors and people are using it, and the reports I hear personally from talking to people is that yeah, it's good for like I have more energy. So if they have some sort of infection, I think in those areas, I think what it's doing is it's helping to mitigate that pathogen load, and then the person in response to that is feeling better. So
So I used to make ozonated water every morning for myself and my assistant because we've talked about this at Primally Pure a lot. She had a lot of acne. She had gone off of her acne medications that she had been on for several years, which involved a lot of antibiotics. So that had messed with her gut. And when she went off of all of that, her acne just kind of went crazy. And so one of the things we did, because she had a lot of residual fungal issues, one of the things that we did was ozonated water every morning for a while. And I think that's one of the things that actually helped clear up her skin because it was clearing up the fungal stuff going on in her gut, which in turn helped her skin.
So one of the pillars, there's 4 pillars to what ozone therapy does in the body. There's immune modulation, mitigates chronic oxidative stress, causes microcirculation, and it's an immune modulation. So in context of immune modulation, essentially what that does is if your immune system is too high, it'll help to bring it down so that the body isn't attacking itself, because that's like an autoimmune condition. The immune system can't distinguish between what's good and bad, and so it just kind of goes after everything. And then on the other side, you have immunosuppress, which would be like people undergoing chemotherapy, people who have gone through a lot of antibiotics, that kind of stuff. So their immune system isn't functioning well enough to be able to take care of the pathogen load that's in their body. So ozone is it's one of the 4 pillars of what it does. It's really good at causing immune modulation. So wherever you're at is like, let's cause balance here. And so that's that homeostatic environment that you want to produce in the body. So when you are drinking ozone water, that's one of the thought processes. Definitely as an IV, it's studied for that rectally, vaginally. It has a lot of literature behind that. Ozone water, though, that would be a thought process behind it is like, is this helping the body to be able to take care of that pathogen load more so that there's not so much presence of fungus and that type of thing?
Would you say that IV ozone is the most powerful administration, or is like rectal, vaginal kind of right up there with it?
I guess it depends on what you're trying to use it for. So if you're doing it for I'm assuming there's not a lot of people listening that have like diabetic ulcers and wounds, but it's out there. A lot of people do have them. But obviously you're going to want to do something directly for like something on the skin like that, like a ulcer or whatever. But as far as, yeah, like a systemic treatment, IV is definitely the strongest. And then rectal vaginal, I mean, it's hard to quantify and say like what percentage is it? 50% is strong? Is it 90% is strong? There was somebody one time that said 95% is good, but it was totally unfounded. It was just their perspective, which is totally fine. But that was their perspective. And so I don't know. I think that what you do see though is that it works very similar. And the fact that you can do it in a couple minutes a day from home, and at a much more cost-effective structure makes it kind of on par with IV ozone therapy when considering all things from
Yeah.
a practical functional perspective. So 1-to-1, it's hard to make that assessment, but you're not going to be able to do an IV every day. or 4 times a week, that get really expensive and be very time consuming. So
What types of conditions do people use systemic, either IV, rectal, or vaginal administrations for?
yeah, so there's the literature side, the clinical side. So 5 most common things that on the clinical side, just what people use it for. Cancer, Lyme, autoimmune, infectious disease, and mold toxicity would be the top 5 categories of where clinicians are using it. And there's good reason for it. But I think the things that it's most studied for would be like immunosuppressed cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy and that type of thing, because there's really good literature showing that it improves quality of life metrics by 70% out of Italy.
Wow.
And so like if they are going through chemo and going through that route, like, I personally have self-elected that I probably won't do that. But if you are, or know somebody who are, they can do that one thing and it's going to make a massive difference. So I think that's really, really cool. Peripheral vascular disease, really, really good for.
What is that?
That's just like you're not getting proper blood flow through your body. So you're not getting good blood flow to your limbs and that type of thing, and it turns into a big issue. So but yeah, it stimulates a microcirculation so that you can get nutrient gas exchange and oxygen to your tissues and that type of thing. But yeah, cancer, Lyme, autoimmune conditions, infectious disease, and mold toxicity. And going back to why those 5 things, well, one, they're really common, but 2, there's the 4 things that ozone therapy does: the mitigating chronic oxidative stress, stimulating microcirculation, and it does that, and that sounds really benign, like blood flow, but it's actually really important. And it does it in what appears to be almost a selective way, because they've done some studies on the brain, and certain parts of it will be hypoxic. When they apply ozone therapy to the patient, those parts are no longer hypoxic, but the other parts of the brain that were not hypoxic, meaning that they don't have enough oxygen, those don't change at all. And so what it's doing is it looks like ozone therapy is intelligent and that it's selective, but it's not. It's actually your body. And that's the really cool thing about it that I love, is that it's not the ozone doing all this work, all this amazing stuff. It's a stress response therapy. And so we are stimulating a very small amount of stress so that your body has the opportunity to recalibrate. Yeah, so ozone therapy works for a lot of different things. There's over 100 things it's been studied for. That doesn't mean that it's like incredible for everything. And some of the studies range in credibility. Some will be like double-blind controlled studies, and some will be just a doctor making observations on what worked for him with his patient base. And so the credibility ranges, but you have this really cool theme where you can see like, okay, across all of these things, it appears to be very safe and obviously effective in some situations. So the things that it's most commonly used for would be cancer, Lyme, autoimmune, infectious disease, and mold toxicity. So mold toxicity is become a huge, go into your history of mold toxicity.
Yeah, so
here.
Yeah, we had our house tested for mold, and it came back high. We did the ERMI. It came back at a 26. It's supposed to be under a 5. So we knew our house had mold. I didn't quite know like what that meant for us at the time. And we bought the house with the intention of remodeling. So we knew, okay, we're going to remodel, remediate at some point. But then we started getting symptoms. So my daughter was getting frequent bloody noses. We were all just getting sick more often than we normally did. And then we were like, okay, let's circle back on that whole mold thing. And we dug more into it, talked to a bunch of different people. We were basically told, like, evacuate immediately. Do not stay in your house another day. And so we moved in with my in-laws for a couple of months, and then we actually pitched a tent in our backyard and lived in the tent. We have thankfully like a nice big backyard. So we pitched the tent, and then we have a lot of family nearby too. So we were just like going over to families' houses for dinners a lot, eating outside kind of a thing. And then we traveled the entire summer and came back, moved into our guest house that had been remodeled, and then lived there for a year. And now we're still in the process of remodeling our main house, but excited to move back into that house in a couple of months. So anyways, all that to say, we initially didn't do much to detoxify. We were just like, let's get out of that environment and then focus on kind of the basics, like being outdoors, grounding, getting sunlight, eating really well. And then we invested in the generator and started doing ozonated water. All of us did that. I started doing the rectal insufflations, which noticed a huge difference on that. And then the ear canal, ozone gas in the ear canal. My husband and I did that. We did that on our kids a little bit. I feel like it all really helped a lot. So why is ozone so effective for mold toxicity specifically?
Well, you're going to have people that respond to it really well and others that don't, just depending on the need of the body. Like, especially addressing the gut, I think is really important. There's like with our diagnostics company, we have the microbiome that we actually quantify. We can detect it through blood a little bit, but it's better through the microbiome. And so it has all this terrible effect on the body where it's just wreaking havoc, all these mycotoxins and that type of thing. So you really want to mitigate those as much as possible. But essentially, when you're applying ozone therapy, as we know, it's an antiseptic. What does that mean? Well, it's killing pathogen, killing infection. It has some of that direct effect, but it's also stimulating your immune system to be able to function better. So that's why mold is such a terrible, I shouldn't say a terrible thing. It's a tough thing because you can't really adapt to it. You can't stay in an environment that's moldy and your body just kind of overcomes it. Some people are more sensitive. They'll respond to it really quickly, start getting sick. Other people will take longer, but it's always going to have a negative effect on you. So you need to get out of that environment. Just doing ozone isn't going to allow you to overcome that. But when you've been exposed to that, it stays in your body for quite a while. So you need a way of getting rid of it. And when you stimulate the immune system, that now gives your body more juice to be able to handle something like mold. And then there's some other benefits too. Like there's some of the symptomology with mold, it ranges, but one of the big ones is fatigue and brain fog, right? And so ozone therapy is helpful, as we said, in microcirculation, oxygen efficiency. So the ability of your red blood cells to be able to deliver oxygen to needed areas so that you're oxygenating your tissues appropriately. There's even some really cool studies on VO2 max, which is like your ability to utilize oxygen on a cellular level. And so I can go into those, but essentially they see VO2 max increase over controls, which means that they had a group of people that did ozone therapy and a group that didn't. They did the exact same thing, and the group that did ozone therapy got a lot better in that thing. But yeah, it can help to alleviate some of those symptoms too, like the brain fog, because now you're distributing oxygen where you should be. You're getting better circulation and that type of thing. So
How I've thought about it in the past is, and you can tell me if this is correct, but pathogens, bacteria, harmful bacteria, they thrive in the lack of oxygen. But then good bacteria do really well with oxygen. So ozone kind of like attacks these pathogenic bacteria by oxygenating them and putting them in an environment in which they can't thrive. And then it's really good for the beneficial bacteria because they love oxygen.
well, like in your gut lining, none of that really loves oxygen. And so you have this whole ecosystem within your gut. It's huge, it's massive. So when you take, for example, a probiotic, it's like a drop in the ocean. Like it's a really big ecosystem that's going on. It's very complex. And it
Yeah,
can be
what is it
challenging
like
to move.
there's like 6 feet or something of
If you were to map out the surface area of your
uh-huh.
colon, it would be a 2,600 square foot house.
That's insane.
Yeah. And a very not dynamic, but very robust ecosystem. Thousands of different strains, all working together. Really important to your entire body as your gut health. People have heard of the gut-brain barrier, but over 50% of the molecules that float around in the metabolites that float around and help your metabolism, which constructs your cells, constructs so much, does so much in the body. Over 50% of those have been modified or synthesized by the gut bacteria. So really, really important that that's in a good spot. But essentially, a lot of that is anaerobic, meaning it doesn't want oxygen, whether good or bad. But when you're doing ozone therapy, say as an insufflation or drinking the ozone water, again, we're using a small dose. So if we were to just maximize it and try to get the whole colon, like you'd wipe everything out. That wouldn't be good. But they've done studies on dysbiosis with rectal and vaginal insufflation. So dysbiosis is when you have the inappropriate type of gut bacteria. So you have more harmful bacteria. It's not conducive to your overall health and that type of thing. So if you're dysbiotic, you want to get into a health-associated microbiome or health-associated state. But when they do ozone therapies in those situations, what they found is it actually remediated that, which is kind of counterintuitive because you would think like, okay, you're putting an oxidant into this anaerobic environment. Isn't it going to just like kill everything good and bad? Well, I think it's because it's a small amount. We're not like bombing the system. And what happens is it stimulates your body to be able to, it creates essentially a better terrain for your body, for that good bacteria to take place, for your immune system to function properly and get rid of the bad bacteria. And that's why I think it can resolve things like dysbiosis. So even though it's all anaerobic, we're doing a small enough amount and we're stimulating a good response there.
What's better if anyone is looking to improve their gut health? What's the best ozone administration for that? Is it the water? Is it the ozonated olive oil capsules? Is it a rectal insufflation? Like, what's going to be the most effective?
I mean, just overall globally, like if I was to go and do it, and yeah, rectal insufflation, not probably what people want to hear, but it does work pretty well. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
it might sound really weird, but it's actually not that big of a deal. Like it's so easy, it's so quick. It's like I've heard it described as a reverse fart.
yeah, essentially. I mean, the amount of gas is like this much, and it is one of those things that you can do it privately. Nobody needs to know. If
For
they
sure.
ask about your ozone generator, say it's
Coffee
ozone water, I don't
enemas
care.
are so popular right now. Like, so compared to a coffee enema, a rectal ozone insufflation is a piece of cake. I just want to say that. It is so much easier, so much quicker, less of a cleanup process involved. It's actually really easy to do.
Yeah, in comparison. I mean, it takes, I'm not exaggerating when I say it takes like 4 minutes or less even. Like, because really most of that is just taking the machine out, setting it on the counter, opening up the oxygen tank, putting the bag on, and then the catheter, and then putting it where the sun don't shine. And then you're all done. Like, you don't need to hold it for more than 10, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you may have to
really
go to the
quick.
bathroom a couple minutes later if you haven't done that already. But it's super easy and it's really effective. Like it gives me the best, most sustained energy and clear-headedness. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yeah, yeah. I wish it was cooler. Like it's so much easier to talk about the IBs, but it does work. So it's like if you're gonna if you're actually trying to be proactive with your health and do something that's practical for you, it's like I think it's a really good tool in the tool belt.
I want to run through real quick, like just some of the other ways that people can use ozone and ways that it's used. I know in dentistry, it's starting to gain some momentum. Like if your dentist isn't using ozone, I would say like it's probably time to find a dentist that is more up with the times and
Yeah.
not like living back in the 70s when people used like bleach and fluoride in dentistry. Would you agree?
Yeah, so like I chipped this front tooth recently, and so I think this is important because dentistry is really important if you have like infections and that type of thing. It can be a deep infection that you don't even know about, hidden infection. So they have like this advanced way of looking at it, but you want a biological dentist. So anyway, I went and looked for a biological dentist, IAOMT.com.
Wait,
And
can you say that again?
IAOMT.com
Okay.
has a list of biological dentists, but not all of them are good because what they'll do is they'll go to one conference just so they get the certification and then they can advertise to more people, but they really don't believe in that. But one thing they do that's really cool is they'll say how many conferences they've been to on the website. So what I did, I was in Florida at the time, and this guy, his name was Mercado, I think, or something like that. Really, really cool guy. Orlando Smiles, I think. But anyway, really, really good dentist. So what I looked for was when I found the region that I was looking for is how many conferences have they been to? Because that tells me are they bought into the thought process behind it, or are they, if they've been to one or two, they probably either they're very green behind the ears in terms of biological dentistry and all that has to offer, or they are just trying to advertise that they're a biological dentist when they're not, because they know that's a huge growing market and people are looking for that. So you can look at how many conferences they've been to, 5, 6, 7, to me signified that they were kind of bought into the thought process behind it. And I made a list of like 4 or 5 of those, went to their website, looked to see if they do ozone, because that's like another green flag to me, is like, okay, they understand what they're doing in this world. They're really bought into biological dentistry. And the reason biological dentistry, I think conventional dentistry is pretty antiquated, doing root canals, all that kind of stuff. It was born out of World War II, very, I don't know, just not rigid, but gruff type of way of dealing with things, where it's like, hey, we just need to get you out of the situation you're in so you can go back on the battlefield. And it evolved from that, and it really, in my opinion, hasn't changed enough to really progress people's health. So biological dentists will do something different, where they do a 3D cone beam scan. And that's another thing to look for, is can they really model everything that's going on in the mouth so that they can see what they do, what to do. They also try to protect your enamel, because your enamel is your enamel. You don't want to get rid of it. So they're not going to shave things off unless it's absolutely necessary, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of biological dentistry.
Yeah. And what about you touched on ozone for pools a little bit. How prevalent is that, using ozone to clean pools and hot tubs?
Yeah, it's not super prevalent in the sense that you can go out and buy one. Some commercial, so there is an industry that currently exists for that. And it's usually small companies that will go and outfit like a commercial pool or a commercial spa hot tub type of thing, with a system that doesn't require any chemicals. So for example, the Sydney Olympics, I think it was 2000, all those pools just used ozone. They didn't have anything else that was used in it. So when you go into the water, and there's not ozone floating around, it has a system where it ozonates it, purifies it, kicks it back out, and by that time it's oxygen. So it's just oxygenated water essentially. But you can't go and buy one. So that's why I'm trying to set it up, is I think we came up with Nuvanta or something, Nuvanta spas. In 90 days we should have some hot tubs that we're going to be actually selling, that has the full system built in, that has like different filtration, sanitary system that uses ozone, hydroxyls, hopefully some silver and copper. We're trying to figure that out, but that type of thing. So that, because the issue there is, like my niece, for example, she can't get into the hot tub that has chlorine or bromine in it, because she's very sensitive to it, so she gets a rash. But there's actually a ton of negative effects to these chemicals that are on EPA, on HHS. You can go and look it up, but mutagenesis, things like that are just going to be really damaging to you long term if you're consistently in it.
Okay, I'm really curious about that, because I used to be a swim instructor, and it was an indoor facility. And so like bromine is typically found in hot tubs, I think, not as much in pools, but because all of this was indoor, they use bromine everywhere. And so I was in this brominated water for like 7-8 hours every day, as were my coworkers, and all of us started getting these awful rashes. And then for several years after that, it hasn't happened in a while, but every time I would go in a hot tub, even long after I stopped working there, the rash would come back. So I developed kind of this bromine sensitivity. And you're saying that is associated, or, bromine, other chemicals too, are associated with like certain health concerns?
Well, it's not medical advice. I'm not a doctor, and your situation might be different, but like, yeah, you can develop chemical sensitivity. So like our bodies do make adaptations, and part of your adaptation to consistent exposure to a toxin, we'll say, because like in that dose for that long period of time isn't good for you. Your body built this rash as some sort of defense mechanism, essentially. But yeah, I think it's very warranted to have, because every single, when I started getting into this, I was like, why is nobody already doing this thing? And so, the primary question I looked at is like, how many of these top hot tub companies have a financial model that benefits off the chemicals? And it was all of them. There's not a single one. And I was like, why? Because it's the printer and the ink business model, where you sell the printer for almost that cost, and then you make all your money on the reusable, the consumable item, which in the case of hot tubs is chemicals. But
there you
yeah,
go.
it needs to exist. I think, because it's like, I've had my own hot tub for 2 years. I've been doing that, and enough people ask about it and all that kind of stuff.
And you also use ozone for your laundry, right?
Yeah,
I've heard you say you don't actually even use laundry detergent. You just use ozonated water.
Heavy soiling and stains, we'll use detergent, but you can get rid of 90% of detergent use with a $400 device that puts ozone in there.
Wow.
It cleans it out really well.
Do you guys sell that?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So you just buy the device and you hook it up with your washer.
Yeah, it's super easy too. I mean, I installed it in 8 minutes, 9 minutes,
Wow.
something like that.
And it works fine also with detergent. So if you do need to use detergent.
Yeah, it's totally fine. Like, it's not going to get rid of stains. So you go on blogs. A lot of people love it. There's positive blogs about that type of technology, but there's some that are like, oh, I didn't get rid of the like mustard and coffee stains off my shirt. And it's like, well, it's meant to deodorize by actually breaking down the molecules that cause the smell and to kill bacteria and that type of thing. You know, your washer will get rid of stains to a degree, but you still might need stain remover and that type of thing for heavy soiling.
Does it have any type of effect on the clothing? Does it break down the fabric at all?
Not to my knowledge. You know, I'm kind of particular about clothes too. I want them to last for a long time, so I always do like on the coldest setting, and when in the dryer, I'll have it on the whatever the lowest setting is as far as heat. I don't want things to be dismantling it, so I'm pretty sensitive. I have like all my clothes I can fit into a carry-on, so I protect those clothes. But so it doesn't dismantle it, but it's working in the sense that the water coming in, there's a small amount of ozone, enough to do the disinfecting and that type of thing, but it's not enough to really be totally dismantling the cloth. If we did have it strong enough, yeah, you would start to notice like the shirt would become more thready and more easily tear, but you do a small enough amount, it doesn't do that.
As we're talking about all of the benefits of ozone therapy, it's just kind of mind-blowing that it hasn't become more of a mainstream thing yet. Do you feel like there's a concerted effort to suppress the use of ozone therapy in America?
I don't think that there's like a intentional concerted effort, but I see incentive structures that don't allow for something like that to come about very easily. I think you could get ozone therapy through FDA approval if you created a extremely profitable financial model, and you would probably have to pair it with some other things. And then you'd have to go get, you know, $200-300 million in funding, spend 10 years of time, do a lot of work, all that kind of stuff. And you could possibly get it through. And then the patients would have to pay out their ears and noses to afford it. And I just don't think that's thinking about the general population of people and already all the cost prohibitive things that exist. I don't know. I'm just not too endeared towards that model of things. But I don't think there's I would be amiss to say that I don't think there's ever been a concerted effort to suppress something. Like you have the Sackler family with Purdue Pharma that. So this is the family that caused the opioid crisis, the ones that got caught, right? And, you know, there's probably dozens of other things out there like that currently that just have not been caught. But I did a tour in pharma country, essentially, in the biopharma crescent, which was really interesting. We were talking with like all sorts of different people. I was representing a different company out of Europe that was really just totally ignorant to the whole situation in the United States. And they're like, we want to go and talk with pharma. And I was like, that'd be kind of interesting. I'll tag along and see what. So some of the stuff we were hearing was wild. But anyway, we rolled by Purdue Pharma and they're still up and running, you know, creating opioids and all that kind of thing. And so I think there is obviously in any system, even in alternative medicine, people that are motivated by financial profit or status or whatever it is above anything else. I do think that the conventional model has a lot more money and a lot more say as to what goes. And I am sure there are individuals that are trying to suppress certain items that they don't want to, like ivermectin was a great example, right? During the COVID crisis. I think that was a great example of something that was suppressed and had a narrative drawn around it rather than like, you know, hey, let's explore this thing. Here's some of the literature on it. Let's try to see if we can make this work. There was none of that. But ozone therapy specifically, I don't see anybody trying to do that. There is, just by the virtue of the FDA approval process, a very difficult system to get into unless you make it super profitable. So it's a very rigid box. So within a rigid box, you're going to have things that work that don't belong in that incentive structure in that system. So like if the FDA says like this is all of medicine, well, that's ridiculous because there's a ton of things that don't cost money, like grounding or sunlight or air or whatever, that can be really, and those might be bad examples because they're not a drug, but
All the things you mentioned fall into this category of things you can't, the things that can't be patented. And so if it can't be patented, it's not going to be as profitable. And the FDA, pharmaceutical companies, like all of this is set up to like for profit and not necessarily to help people. So it doesn't fit within that box.
yeah, I think, the to me, the thing that you don't want to fall into as a consumer and somebody that's trying to drive your health and the health of your family is you don't want to fall into paradigm thinking, which is like, I am, conventional. I believe in the FDA. I love the FDA. Therefore, everything that they say is gospel and everything else is bad. But then you have the other side of it too, where it's like, I believe everything in holistic medicine is for me and for my good, and everything in the like conventional model is bad. Like you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think what I'm trying to say is like we have these paradigms, we put ourselves mentally into these boxes, and you need to critically think and assess things individually, which is very difficult to do. But there are good things in conventional medicine, and there are great things in holistic medicine. And I think I obviously fall much more on the holistic side of things as far as a frame of thinking and a way to do health. But there's good things across the spectrum wherever you go. I think that, within the conventional model, there's probably obviously in the case of chronic disease where we're not handling it very well.
Have you personally experienced any type of pushback, either you personally or with Simply O3 since you've started doing this?
Yeah, regulation is a real thing, and a lot of people in this space have faced regulators and people walking in your office, just all sorts of different angles, whether it's a doctor, which would be more like the state boards and things like that. But for me personally, I can't really go too much into the experience, but the net output of that was essentially I had to delete 10 years of work, which was thousands of pages of writing. I had a book, I had hundreds of videos that really digested everything down in a very condensed format, and just had to take all of that offline, which was pretty sad. But it also, through that I had the choice to do that. I could do that, or I could, and I still get to continue forward with Simply O3. And that was this decision we made to be compliant with everything. And
Wow.
fortunately, we still get to operate and do things with or more rigidity. There's just less that we can do, but we still get to continue forward. So that's good.
That must have been so incredibly frustrating and hard for you. What keeps you going, even despite these challenges and hurdles that you faced?
Yeah, there's been a lot of really tough points in my life. And that was like, although that sucked, that also just like paled in comparison to so many other things. And so I think that gives you a lot of perspective, and just something I remember thinking at that time going through that process, because it was traumatic and it was challenging, and it was really a lot of emotions just all over the place. But and my brother went through something similar. I remember him talking about like last night I just went home and hugged one of my kids, and I was just sobbing and all kind of stuff. And because you feel like you've been working really hard to do something that's great. And I always think about Matt and like his journey he was on. And, with everything I know today, I wish I could have applied that to Matt. And I don't really get to, but I get to do it for a lot of other people. And that's really, really cool. But anyway, I just remember thinking at that time in particular where like, hey, everything is kind of wiped clean, more or less. And you get to start not over, but from a very different standpoint, and compliance and all that kind of thing. Like I feel like I'm doing a good thing. So, but I remember thinking that God was just saying like, I have you right where I want you to be, and that was really comforting to me. And it just really brought into a perspective that like, regardless of what's going on, I'm taking you where I want you to go. And so that to me is so important to be able to hear that voice and to be able to continue walking in that. Because I've always felt, not always felt, but I remember, and I thought through this, I think it was last year a little bit more like, well, I'm a business guy, right? I make a good living, and that's great, but I'm not doing what I wanted to do when I was like 12 or 13, which was work on mercy ships as a physician and be like totally in philanthropy kind of thing, or a missionary or a pastor or something that's like more, I guess you could say spiritual or better. And so I always felt kind of like insecure in the sense that, well, I'm making a good living. I have a relatively comfortable life in some senses. I have a lot of blessings and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. God just really spoke clearly to me that this is your act of worship. This is your ministry. And it took me from a place of being like, well, I got my 30 minutes of devotions in the morning and prayer and reading and whatever, and that's my God time. That's when we connect. And then I go to work and I do my thing. And then I go home and I do my thing, and like a very compartmentalized view. But going through that process, like everything we see and feel and touch and do is an expression of God. And so I can understand God more through like this conversation that we're having right now, through my relationship with my wife. And I know this sounds a little bit weird, but I'm trying to tie it together. Through all these things, I am seeing different aspects of God. They are not God himself, but I am seeing something that tells me about like, this is who I am. And so then I was able to view my work and what I do as really succinct and a co-creation with God and an act of worship. And so that really excites me. I think is the thing at its deepest core is I get to do this as my ministry. I get to do this as my calling. And I think that calling is something up the alley of like, if every person was Matt that you work with, how could you make that better for that person? And so I'm trying to do that in the most unrestricted way as possible, whether that's like money is restricting me or bandwidth or time, but just trying to find like what is the best thing I can do to bring that to fruition. Like we really are helping people, and we are really putting people's health first. But then also in between that too, I have all these cool relationships, whether it's you or people I work with that you get to dig into relationally. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh,
but...
it's so good. I love that so much. And it's such a testament to the fact that God is using what you're doing, even if you have to work within certain restrictions and guidelines, like that's not the end all be all. God is still going to use it, and he is still using it. And not all of us were called to go into the mission field or to be a pastor, but that doesn't mean that what you're doing is any less of a ministry and that his hand isn't in it just as much. So
yeah,
it's awesome.
I mean, yeah, I don't know why that's such a, I don't know. Have you ever felt that way? Like, why am I not? Like,
I grew up in a
more
family of
spiritual
church workers actually. And so I was kind of the black sheep who went off and started a company instead of becoming a Lutheran teacher or church worker. So I can relate to a lot of what you're talking about. And at the same time, I still feel like this is what I was called to do. And that's been affirmed time and time again. So it's been something that I've had to reconcile too, for sure, and have thought through. But God calls us all to different things, and it doesn't mean there's less of a purpose in it if it isn't full-time, quote, traditional ministry.
This is your ministry.
Yeah.
And I think you really need to view it that way. Because I think that it's both like a symptom, and probably a bit of a lie at the same time, in the sense of like when we think like this is not a ministry, or like this is my work time, or like it's a lie, but it's also a symptom of like maybe you're not totally giving yourself like surrendering over to God in a sense. And maybe it's a mix of the two or one or the other, but I think that's what I've seen in my own life personally is like, there's probably been times where I'm really not fully surrendering and giving it all over to God and really viewing this as my calling, and really, I'm not gonna lie, I've had moments of greed or like different things that come in the way, and like we all have sin, and so I think it's easy to take those situations and then I'm a bad person because of this or that type of thing, and God provides forgiveness and wants us to step forward in our power, which is through him.
So good. I love that and completely agree. Would you consider ozone to be an effective alternative to antibiotics?
Such a loaded question.
In two sentences, please answer this. Just kidding. No.
Okay, so I think in certain situations, antibiotics are going to be essential for if there's a infection that's life threatening, and antibiotics are the thing that might be needed for that. I think in certain situations it could be great. I think for the way antibiotics are used, ozone could probably replace a good portion of antibiotics that are out there, but probably not everything.
Yeah, for sure for like skin infections, or not even an infection, like an active infection yet, but I think parents these days are so quick to just wipe Neosporin on every little cut. And I feel like in those cases, ozone is just as good, if not better.
Yeah, so ozone therapy could probably replace a lot of antibiotic use if, talk to your medical provider, all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not a doctor, but I think it could replace a lot. I did have this, and I've had a number of similar stories like this, but I was on a group call with a number of people, and one of the questions I asked in the call was like, what got you into ozone therapy? And one of the ladies chimed in and said, well, I actually got into it because I was in the hospital and I had sepsis, and my father-in-law or whoever it was snuck in an ozone device and was doing infusions with the ozone, and my sepsis went away. And there's, I'm not saying that it's going to work for everybody's sepsis or anything like that. Do as your medical provider advises. But I've heard a lot of interesting stories like that that have been really cool to hear.
And probably so many anecdotal stories like that. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason that ozone isn't more heavily researched is because it is not very profitable. It's really inexpensive. And so there's not going to be a ton, there is some, but there's not a ton of research out there on ozone, because who is going to profit from footing the bill for all of the research? No one, because it's very cheap. So yes, anecdotal stories like that are just so interesting to me. What about the skin benefits of ozone? What skin benefits are there?
Yeah, so you can use the ozone, oil, water, gas. They're all going to have some similar mechanisms, but essentially cut infection. So it even like stimulates a natural immune response in that area. Your skin creates hydrogen peroxide. You actually create ozone. It's a part of your immune response system. So you natively create this molecule. But it stimulates more of the hydrogen peroxide. You also make hydrogen peroxide in the area to cut infection. And then it helps with like growth factors, calling growth factors to the area to stimulate the healing response. So,
what about non-wounds, just like beauty benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I know you have a skincare company. I wish I did more skincare, typical guy kind of thing. But yeah, I just have never had much interest in cosmetics. But I know there's some studies with age spots. There's tone and that kind of thing. Collagen regeneration. There's some really good studies on that for collagen regeneration. That helps with skin's elasticity and that type of thing. So a lot of people use the ozone oil as a cosmetic, apply it to the face, nightly before bed. The ozone water, it's just not going to have that staying effect. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to stay on the skin as well. It's going to be more of like a quick rinse. You still can do the rinsing, but it's also a lot stronger. So you have to be careful not to be affecting your skin's biome too much. Like you don't want to do it daily, that type of thing. But the other thing that we never even talked about is we talked about dentistry, but its oral application. The oil pulling is incredible. That stuff is awesome.
Yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah, tooth infections, that kind of thing. Oil pulling is when you put oil in the mouth, you swish it around for like 20 minutes, and your teeth, they're not just like they're actually a porous type of material. So they have all these like tubes, and essentially an infection can get really far down in there. And so food and oils and water and those different things have to make their way through these long tubes. So that's why you swish it for 20 minutes. And
20 minutes.
20 minutes, yeah, okay. 15, 20 minutes, sorry. And that's why but with the ozone oil, now it has a lot more power behind it to cut infection. So when it's getting down into there, it's much more helpful for eliminating infection and that type of thing. But that's really good.
Can you heal cavities that way?
I've heard a lot of anecdotes on that. Like there's one lady recently that she said she did it with like 2 or 3 kids. They went back and didn't have cavities. I've heard that story probably 50 to 70 times.
Do you guys sell that on your website?
Yeah, it's just called ozone pulling solution or ozone oil pulling solution or something.
You have several viral cold plunging videos on your Instagram. I want to hear about some of your favorite biohacks.
Yeah, I'm kind of a simpleton, so I'm not like I think it's easy to get lost in the novelty of something new, and so my pendulum swing away for that, for better or worse, has been like I want to simplify my life because at one point I had tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff, and it's just kind of like this to a degree for me was a little bit much, so I just kind of simplified down into good sunlight, good water, good air quality, good social connection. And those are kind of and good food, and those are really my foundational rocks to everything. And then there's probably some things that are an added benefit. Sauna I love, so I do sauna all the time. I do cold plunging fairly regularly, less often than I used to. What else do I? Red light therapy I think is awesome. Let's see, flow presso is really cool. Have you ever
Never
used
heard of that.
Okay, of the lymphatic drainage, like the compression boots and that kind of stuff that you can do. Flow presso is like awesome. So if there's one more thing I was going to add to our place, it would definitely be that.
So that's like the brand name for those boots, those compression.
Yeah, but it does the whole body, and
Okay.
it's like you come out of that and you feel like you just got the best massage in the world.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Cool. So it's like a full body lymphatic flow suit kind of thing.
Yeah, Freddie Kimmel, you can look him up. He has podcasts on it. Really, really cool guy. Has his own interesting backstory with cancer and all this stuff. Was on Broadway and like really, really cool guy. I love him. But yeah, that'd be up there for me, I guess. As far as other biohacks, I just don't have a lot. Like
That's really interesting.
community is number one for me.
Yeah, that's huge. I think those things are so foundational, but I think the other things are fun too, to kind of add in where they make sense.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard of that compression suit. That's really interesting.
I got pretty big into altitude contrast training at one point, which is like, that?
No, I mean, yeah, I've heard of it, but I've never
So
done
it's
it.
EWAT, which is exercise with oxygen. So you're like on an Airdyne or a bike, and you have this mask on and it's flushing oxygen into your system, and then it flips to where you're at like, I can't remember, a really high altitude, and it's like very depleted oxygen. So there's like 10% in the air or half, I don't know what it is. But anyway, the thought process there is like, and you feel like you're dying, but, because you're working out, you're doing a sprint and you have deprived oxygen.
That sounds
but the thought process is like you're getting more nitric oxide and then you flush it with oxygen, you get a ton in your system. I thought that was cool. The biggest thing I noticed was breath control got a lot better. But elemental things like sauna, ice bath, those are up there for me. Just things that kind of reflect how you would be if you were in the natural environment. And
I was just gonna say that. That's like just taking it. I mean, they're modern biohacks, but from an ancestral perspective of like, if we didn't have heating, air conditioner, all of these comforts and luxuries that we have, we would have been exposed, like naturally exposed to a wider variety of temperatures on an everyday basis. So it's kind of just like simulating that in more of a controlled environment.
Yeah, I mean, sauna's been around for forever, but even Lewis and Clark, there's this really cool journal entry they had, and I forget they came across somebody that had been paralyzed for a number of years from like waist down or something like that. Then they built with rocks like a steam sauna, and they just put them in and out like all day. And then by the end of the day, he was able to walk again. And that's their journal entry. It's super anecdotal, but there's some really cool stuff. And so I really like the temperature contrast. Those types of things, working out is phenomenal. Oh, one thing I do really like is Katsu.
What's that?
Katsu blood flow moderation bands, blood flow restriction. So those are really cool. Essentially, they're these bands you put around your arms or your legs, and then you work out. And what they do is they restrict the amount of blood flow going to the area. So you have a type 1 muscle. That's kind of like more your aerobic endurance muscle when you're running, when you're doing like a bit of weightlifting, but then you have type 2, which is like the fast twitch, powerful type of muscle. And so it fatigues your type 1 muscle. You transition to type 2 really quickly. And so you get a lot of hypertrophy muscle growth.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like for women that are interested in it, tons of women use it. It's not like you're going to get big blow up on big biceps. That's really hard to do
Yeah, yeah.
unless you're like really trying. But it is really cool because if you have like an injury, you can get a full workout with like 5 pounds, and you'll be sore for a couple days.
Wow.
But that's really cool. So if you're injured, I think those are great. I think there's also some studies that if you couple that with your regular training, the your performance goes up. So if you're sprinting, you're going to become a faster sprinter, that kind of stuff. So, I guess I do have some biohacks.
Yeah, it sounds like you have one too.
Ketones are the thing I've been on lately. So like ketonade,
The minerals, the seawater minerals.
butyrate salts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Quinton.
Yeah, I know that one. That one's
Okay,
great too.
different.
Yeah, Robert Slovak and all them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ketones, like when you are fasting or eating a
The orange
ketogenic
bottle,
diet,
the orange and white bottle.
I think there is a ketone. I use Keto Aid and then Delta G I've used before
Okay.
too. But those are like,
Just
you're not going to
exogenous
get a lot of
ketones.
sleep. Yeah, exogenous ketones, you're not going to get a lot of sleep. Take that before you go to bed, like, because sometimes with flights and stuff, it's like I have 2 hours to sleep. And so I'll take those before bed as soon as I wake up, and it's like it's like butter then.
I've never
Or
taken them before
afternoon.
bed.
It's the worst thing you've probably ever you've tried them.
Yes.
Yeah.
It tastes like gasoline.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Those are
horrible.
great.
But I do feel the mental clarity from them, from like, because they put you into a state of ketosis, or they give
Yeah.
you ketones.
Yeah.
So
Another
then you
fuel
feel
source.
that without like, I think about when I've done extended fasting, like the clarity that I get from that is because your ketones are so high,
Yeah.
right? And so you're kind of just getting that without necessarily having to like fast or
Yeah.
be in a state of nutritional ketosis.
So I bundle nicotine, ketones, and isohemalones together for like deep focus days.
I haven't
Those are
heard
great.
that last one. What is that?
Isohemalones,
Yeah.
iso alpha. Basically, these are iso alpha acids. When you take it, stimulates the vagus nerve essentially. So
Is
you
that
get
like
dopamine and
Alpha
acetylcholine.
CPG, GPC? Does
No,
that fall under that category?
I
Someone
don't
just
know
gave me
actually.
some supplements for like focus, and that was one of them. It was like Alpha, I'm not saying the last part right, GPC or
There's,
something.
I don't. It could be. They're iso alpha. I don't know a ton
Okay.
about them, but iso alpha acids, and they're derived from bitters, herbs. And it's just concentrated. I bit one open just to see what it tasted like one time, and my mouth was just like, it's so bitter for like 2 to 3
Wow.
hours. So you definitely just want to swallow it, but
Yeah.
it's like an actual brain health supplement. They had one study where they grew back gray matter in the brain with using these. So
Wow.
like somebody's alcoholic or traumatic brain injury or whatever, brain atrophy, um, these have been shown to grow back gray matter, which is really
Probably
cool.
that combined with like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because that's been shown to do the same thing as well, right? Like parts of the brain that have lost function, it can restore the function
Yeah.
to those areas of the brain.
I think so. Yeah, so I guess HBOT would be in that there too. I just don't do it very often because it's
Yeah.
time consuming. But
It is. You mentioned nicotine.
Yeah.
Tell me about nicotine. Do you use it personally?
yeah, too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm addicted to it as of probably like the last 2 years. So I don't advertise
Mm-hmm.
that people should do it, but it is something that I use, and it is really useful for late nights, like I have to stay awake, or I'm tired and I need to focus and that type of thing. But I don't advertise getting into it for the purpose of like once you get into a state that you're consistently using it, if you use it like 3 to 6 milligrams a day or somewhere in that range, that's fine. It has some protective effects, has some positive effects and that type of thing. But once you start to use it more than that, you can cause can cause stress response essentially. So
I use nicotine as well. It's not something I've talked about before for that same reason. I don't want to
Yeah.
necessarily encourage others to use it, but it can be helpful for times when I really need to focus and hammer things out. And I try to stay within that like 3 to 6 milligram range, kind of split up even like 2 milligrams at a time is what I'll typically do.
Yeah, I used to too. I use a lot now.
I love that you just admit that.
Too much.
Um,
Well, that's how it goes. I just want
it,
people to know
yeah,
that it's
yeah,
the tobacco industry,
it can
so
be
you
a
know how to
slippery
get
slope.
you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For anyone who's interested in purchasing an at-home ozone generator, ozone kit, talk to us a little bit about what you offer with Simply O3 and kind of what the price points are, and just practically how to even go about getting that fully set up with oxygen and everything for at-home use.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot. I'm going to tell you it's going to take 2 hours, and then you'll know everything to use this thing for the rest of your life. So if you can dedicate 2 hours to figuring it out, that's all you need. But essentially, the best way to get started is to go to simplyo3.com or metaskill.com, download the guide. That's going to teach you everything you want to know in a pretty condensed format. There's a guide that just kind of walks through everything. You need to get this, 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 this. On simplyo3.com, if you just buy a 3.0 complete kit and you just know you want to do it and you don't want to do all the research, just buy that and then you're all good. You'll get all the protocols and everything with it.
What about getting set up with an oxygen
You
tank?
do need to get an oxygen tank. So the easiest way is to go somewhere locally that's like a weld supply or oxygen supply store.
That's what we do.
So there's medical oxygen and there's weld oxygen. They're two different things that are filled from the same source.
Mm-hmm.
One is regulated, you need a prescription for, and one you don't. So a lot of people find it easier to get the one that you don't need a prescription for. And you can just go into a Praxair air gas weld supply shop and say, I need a 40 cubic foot oxygen tank. People feel uncomfortable doing that because it's just weird, but it is just like ordering a coffee. You just go in, they give you the oxygen tank, and you leave.
Yeah, it's the same exact thing, and you don't need to say what you're using it for. You just need to ask for it and buy it.
Yeah, don't be weird about it. Just
Yeah.
I want an oxygen tank. It's probably a little bit different than like, if you walk into a weld store versus
They might be a little suspicious.
yeah,
No, I don't
normal
actually
get
do
up
it.
on and I have stains on my shirt and all that. Like,
Just look a little rough around the edges and
Yeah.
they won't question you. No, I've never done it myself, but my husband goes in
what's this
and gets
beautiful
it.
person doing here? They should be in here. Yeah.
What about for someone who is interested in working with a doctor and maybe doing IV ozone? How would they find someone to work with?
Yeah, just search ozone therapy near me on Google Maps, and it's going to pull up a list of people, and then just make sure they do IV ozone. And that's the best way. We used to have a map, but we couldn't keep up with everything, so I don't have the map anymore, and Google is honestly great for that. So
Micah, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for our audience to learn more about all things ozone. Where can people find you and find Simply O3?
yeah, so people can find Simply O3 stuff at simplyo3.com, ozone educational materials at mediskill.com, which is MEDI skill.com. My Instagram, which is Micah for Health. I don't post much, but you can message me there. I'd love to talk with you. And then there is another project I've been working on for the last 2 years that I'm really, really excited about. Ozone therapy is great. I think it's a really good tactic. But one thing that I saw in the industry is that when they're like, say you were to go around and talk to all these different people, they all have their tools and everybody kind of turns into a hammer and everything's a nail. So it's like ozone therapy or red light or this or that. And it's like, we need something that really kind of spans the spectrum that just says like, for you, Bethany, this is the thing that's going to be the most helpful. So I got into diagnostics a couple of years ago, started working with some world-class scientists in that and working on something called multiomics, which is a relatively complex topic. It's really, really cool. I find it fascinating. But anyway, it's just about giving people access to their health data and what's going to be helpful for them. And that's called Theriome. But there's more information out there on the World Wide Web you can find.
Thanks, Micah.